All right, well, welcome and thank you so much for offering to be here and sharing some of your time with us, Roxanne. So I would like to officially welcome you. And this is the Power of Atlantic Female Leadership series, which is really a fireside chat. Even though neither of us are sitting beside the fire right now, we can imagine that there is one. I've got my slippers on, so that's probably as close as we're going to get. And really just wanted to invite women from Atlantic Canada to share their voice and experience with other women who might be listening here locally, but also around the globe, because we have some incredible, very talented, very accomplished female leaders here in Atlantic Canada, and you are one of them. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to introduce you and give everybody a bit of a snippet of why we would want to speak with you and share your story today. So your company is Innovatia Inc, which is a global knowledge management company, and it provides software and services. And you have offices not only where you're located in New Brunswick, but also in Calgary, in Texas, in India, and tremendous success because since you purchased the company in 2009, that company has grown by 350%. So congratulations on that success. I think if we dig in more about your bio, we begin to learn so much about your role in New Brunswick in education, and also your role with an anti-poverty initiative and your role in gender equality. So you are one of the founding members of Women for 50%, which I know we have spoken of a few times now, which is a group of New Brunswick female leaders whose goal is to achieve gender parity and equality in the New Brunswick legislature. So we're very excited to hear about that and your perspective on that. And so you have a lot of awards behind you as well. So I'm going to mention a few of them if that's okay with you. I think it's important to acknowledge our accomplishments. And so here we go. In 2014, you were inducted into the New Brunswick Business Hall of Fame, and you received the Order of New Brunswick. In 2018, you were appointed a member of the Order of Canada. That's just incredible, Roxanne. You were also named one of Atlantic Canada's or Atlantic Region's 50 most accomplished business executives by Atlantic Business Magazine in 2005, 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. And you have also been named Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year in 2013 for the Atlantic region. So, just want to sit with that for a second and really just say we're so happy to have you here. I know we've had a couple of conversations now about, our thoughts on, what's going on locally and internationally and our perspectives on women in the region. And so I know that you have some views on that, and we're excited to hear your perspective. So welcome. Thank you for being here. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Henriette. And welcome. I am right now on the St. John River, originally the Wolastoq River, and just so pleased to be here. And Henriette, when you're going through the litany, it's really interesting because it's kind of like, okay, done. And what's next? And what are you going to do? So I am humbled by every one of those things because there are so many people that do so much in our communities. And this is just recognition. And when I accept those awards, it really is with the view of how does that build, my capacity and my brand to be able to do more, to leverage out and to help the community, help other women, build our business. And so it's always with that view. I want women, my granddaughters included, and my daughters, to see that, we can stand up and take applause for our accomplishments, that we can accomplish, really neat things. And that we shouldn't back down from accepting those things because, and as a woman, your first reaction is, me? Like, did you call the right person? And I actually did say that when I thought it was a joke. when I was called about the Order of Canada. So it's whether it's endemic in the human being or it's endemic in women who are more humble, I think, than perhaps our male counterparts in terms of what we do accomplish. So it really is always with the view to me is, to ensure that our young women see us on that stage and that they are inspired by that and they see the possibility. Because if it's only men on that stage, where do they see their possibility in their future? So that's really, really important to me, and before I begin, I'll start, and then, Henriette, you can ask me some questions. But before I begin, I'd really like whoever is listening to this to write down 3 questions. Just take a moment, get a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. What does success look like for me and my family, however you define that? What does success look like? How do you define success? What are you willing to do for it? And I think that's a really important question. What do you have to do, and what are you really willing to do for that? And then the third question is, who am I going to ask in the next week to help me accomplish that? Who am I going to reach out to in the next week to accomplish that? And I will get into that a little bit ongoing, but if we are going to be successful, we need help. And women don't like to ask for help. It's a sign of weakness. It's I can do this. If I have to ask for help, what does that look like on the other side? And so, I would, and I'll be talking about this a little bit. We have to ask for help, even if it's just the people on this call, or the people in our near communities. And I think especially in Atlantic Canada, I can't remember asking someone to help me or meet with me to discuss something where I just got turned down. I may not get exactly what I want, but I have never experienced anyone who has just said, no, I can't do that. I can't talk to you. So we really need to figure that out. And, when we ask for help and we're asking for people's feedback, I think we got to accept it, question it, challenge it a little bit, but we need to be open to, what other people are presenting to us. I think the other thing is when you're asking for help, when you're seeking the name of that person that you're going to talk to in the next week, try to really think about someone who has an open, expansive, inquisitive mind. And I'm not saying, I guess my husband is he challenges everything, and he looks at it from the dark side and what are the things that could trip us up. And that's always good. You need to have that. But I think when you're beginning to plan and figure out what are your next steps, you really need someone who can explore that with you in a positive way. So before I begin, I just want you to put those questions down, and we'll talk about it, throughout the session here. But, I'm a realist. I don't want anyone to think that I've got rose-colored glasses on, although I know a lot of people think when I'm talking about things or venturing into things that they feel that perhaps I do, but I really, really don't. I'm very practical. And, I think today is another interesting, epoch for us to look at leadership and to look at, how women succeed, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. There are so many horrific things in our world that we need to not ignore, but the environment, LGBTQ plus communities under attack, women's rights to make decisions about their own bodies, that being repealed in many areas very close to home. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, via social media and other things. Revelation after revelation about autocracies to our beautiful Indigenous brothers and sisters, the rising mental health issues among our youth. And I think that, these are not, obviously, these are very consequential things that that are important for us to consider as a society. But when you look at the pandemic, and there's lots of other things, but when you look at the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic is what I've been thinking about. Women were really impacted by that so significantly more than males, and even the she session was coined versus recession during the pandemic because women, lost their jobs to a greater degree. They stayed home with families to a greater degree, in that sandwich generation, looking after kids and, our elderly. So women took the brunt of that because we are the core caregivers in our families. And so when we think about the impact of the recession and the residual effect of that, and you look at all of these huge mountain of issues that are taking place in the world and globally where, attention is going, in our communities, in our governments, in our businesses, it kind of puts another level of pressure on women identifying, that what they want to succeed and take leadership roles in, and the help that they need to do that. Because if you have the lesser voice, there is a need for, every area, of government, business, and, not-for-profits and organizations to understand that there are things that we need to do to lift women up, to allow them to have that voice. That's not taking our responsibility or accountability away, but we really, we need that help. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's kind of what's been playing out in my mind a little bit is, what is it that we need to do to allow for women to regain that position? And I feel like we're moving forward and then we fall back. And I'll take you back. I'll intersperse this with little stories and things that we pay attention to, and things that you assume because there was momentum, that that momentum is continuing. And I grew up in the the 60s and 70s, Gloria Steinem, and women's rights, and all of those things that were accomplished on our behalf to enable us to be where we are, in many respects. And I had lunch with someone yesterday, a friend, and she reminded me that when we celebrate what's right in the world, it gives us the strength and the passion to fix what's wrong. And so I think we've got to celebrate some of those things for sure. Like, there are so many advances that we should be considering, but also also look at that from the point of view of where we need to leverage back up. So in many respects. So one story that I have is why and how I started Women for 50% in New Brunswick. In the 80s, we had a lot of females that were very actively involved in politics, and women who were in leadership roles in politics. Many of the ministers in Frank McKenna's government were female, and they had very strong voices. and, there was a rising momentum of that, throughout the world, in Indira Gandhi and so many more, that sometimes we get complacent. We say, well, that's great, that's happening, and we're good to go. It's that trajectory is going to continue. And about 10 years ago, probably not that long, but pretty close, I was invited to the legislature at one of the investitures of the new government, and I believe it was Brian Galant's government, and I looked down in the legislature to a sea of suits, and all men. Like, I think there were 3 women in the, on the floor. And I honestly got a feeling of, I felt sick to my stomach, and I felt guilty, and I thought, oh my God, like what happened? And at the reception afterwards, at the Lieutenant Governor's residence, again, a sea of suits. And, there were more women there, but more from the point of view of, riding associations and women that help these guys get their seats. So, which is great. But I resolved at that point that something that I was, if you're going to be part, you can't just be part of the problem, you got to be part of the solution. So, and I run my own business. So we, I looked around me at 11 or 12 very powerful women in the province, and I asked them if they joined me, and there was, without hesitation, every one of them, jumped on the bandwagon immediately, fully engaged. And I guess there's a point where we have to be open to the universe in terms of what's it saying to us, and also asking for that help, because although I've got a good network in New Brunswick, people like Aldea Landry, who had been a minister and been in politics for a very long time, she had a great network, very specifically in our Francophone region, beyond that, but very specifically in that. I contacted, a minister in the Conservative government to join us. So it was a non-party, non-biased, non-partisan group, and we were both political, business, and academics. So we really looked at this from many ways, in terms of what education do we need to provide to to the community, to help them figure out what do we need to advance and push forward with the leaders of the political parties. What is the communication outreach that we have to do? How do we create awareness for this? So we, and again, we needed money. We needed money to do some of this stuff. So, I reached out to a friend of mine in Toronto, who had been the chancellor at UNB when I was chair of UNB, and asked him if he would support us. And again, it was immediate, yes. And so he supplied us with enough money to launch an event in Fredericton that was self-funded. So no one had to pay anything. We brought speakers in. We brought all the leaders to the table. We had panel sessions. And I think we had 400 people at that event, 400 women who were able to, many of them were thinking, how do I help? How do I become, involved in politics? And, or, is there someone near to me that I know that I could encourage? And I guess here's another very interesting fact that I learned along the way, was that men that are asked, and usually if they're being asked by the party, whichever party it is, Men have to be asked twice. Women have to be asked up to 8 times before they will say yes. Now, some of that is, family related, but a lot of it is confidence. A lot of it is, why are you asking me? What chance do I have to succeed? Men do not process that in the same way. But the reality is the reality. So we were very, very conscious of this thing going dark on me again. We were very conscious of having that information and then making, the decision about how we educated the ridings and the parties about, what was needed to have more women involved. We did have a significant uptick in and what our first goal was to have women run. And ultimately we want to have parity in the legislature for females, but we wanted to have women run, and I guess we went from about 8% to 25%, in that next election. So sure, that was a great lift, but not quite what we were targeting. But again, it's about momentum and work and continuing to drive that momentum. In the next election, we increased again by, it was about 34%, I believe, in the next election. And then, COVID has kind of taken a swath out of a lot of things. We have just gotten back together again. And we're trying to, again, looking at the context that I talked about, at the beginning, about all these things that we're sitting in, as a society, and trying to figure out what are our next steps. What are we going to be doing? Because our election in New Brunswick will be in 2024, if not before, but probably 2024. So we really have 2 years, a little less than 2 years right now, to really, get back on the bandwagon. A couple of interesting things that have happened during this period of time is that many other women's groups started up, and they were really focused on the municipal elections. And last year in the municipal elections, we had historic success in terms of women, winning their roles in the municipal elections, as well as the number of women who were mayors in the, in those elections. So it was really exciting, a very exciting time for all kinds of reasons. Because we had other groups like See Jane Run grow up out of, some of the things that we believe that we initiated. We created a great education curriculum that was reused throughout the province. They were assets that can be reused, and we'll be shaking those off again for the next provincial election. But also that municipal election, those successes are also, they enable, a feeding pool for the next run at the provincial election. So there are just so many things that, that have come out of that. But it came out of the seed of, first of all, we had this, stasis going on because and personally, I assumed things were just moving along, not really clicking into some of these things, becoming aware, and then, starting to ask people, if they could help, what they would do. And we just had brilliant minds. We have brilliant women leaders, in Atlantic Canada that we can be taking advantage of. And I don't think there is one woman that I have, yet to meet in any capacity that would say, no, I don't want to do that. As a matter of fact, in that instance, I did have people call me and say, why didn't you reach out to me? I would love to be involved. So, next time around, we're going to take that feedback. And I guess the other thing is the process of learning. So each election, provincial election, we have gone out and done a full-scale study with the candidates, the successful candidates, and the folks that they're all successful, but the ones that won the seats and the ones that didn't, and getting their feedback on what they needed to, what they felt they needed to be successful. What were the challenges? Why did they pull back from not running sooner, and would they run again? So we've got a treasure trove of information that we'll be reusing in that vein. And I want to, just in terms of the asking people and getting that feedback, I'm gonna switch to business a little bit. But I think for women that are listening that might think that politics is in their bailiwick, that's something they might be successful. Your voice is so needed, because until we really fill in our legislatures, that we have more equality in the voice that's being being given on the floors of our legislature. And it's also male female, but it's also the LGBTQ plus community. It's diversity in many regards. So we really have to be anyone who has a role in encouraging anyone, or anyone who's feeling like they want to run in an election. There are organizations that they can reach out to. Reach out to me. Right. If you feel like that's something that you want to do, and we can point you in the right direction in your province. And just going back though, Henriette, we need to be very, very, leaders in our Atlantic region need to be very conscious of our legislatures, which they're making decisions on our futures every day. And then leadership roles on boards and commissions. We have to be pushing our governments and our municipalities and our organizations to, make sure that they have a very diverse, equal voice, not only in the makeup of the board, but in the leaderships of the boards. That's where power is coalescing around those leadership roles. So, I just want to make sure that, if you feel that you want to take a leadership role, speaking to anybody that's maybe listening to this podcast, whether it's, stepping out into politics, which, my goodness, we need young female leaders and in our provinces to be stepping forward, and whatever help you need, then we need to be supporting you in that.
Yeah, I think,
but also on boards and commissions.
It's huge. I mean, I've spoken to several women, who have said, wouldn't it be great if, we just don't feel like our voices are heard. I'm speaking really just here in where I live in Nova Scotia, and I know our representation of females in legislature is not great. Not a pretty picture. And it's interesting for me when I share, because what I'm hearing you talk about is we have to kind of disrupt the denial, like the awareness piece. Like I could feel you describing this moment where you're sitting in this room thinking like, oh, kind of blind to it. And then all of a sudden it like smacks you right across the face.
Yes.
And I wrote down here, wouldn't it have been nice if all the men would have looked around and noticed that there were only suits in the room?
Yeah.
And we have to, I think, at some point recognize that if that was going to happen, it would have happened by now. And so
Right.
For you to see it, for you to see the bias and what was showing up in the room, it's fantastic. But I do think that women are like, I don't even know what, it feels like ominous to go into politics. Like there's some sort of secret path to getting there, and or the same is also true in business and leadership, that it's only for certain people and it's not
Yeah.
for everybody,
Yeah.
and I think we need to really demystify that process,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
we make it more accessible to people who feel called to serve specifically.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, it's called to serve in politics, but also leadership roles in, like I said, boards and commissions and in
Yes.
other organizations. If you're called, if you feel, called, and that's why, I did say, what does success look like for you? How do you define that? Because, when you're looking at that, there are dimensions, and this comes out of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There are different dimensions to your life, and there's your family, there's your community, there's your church, and if you, and my son has the church, which is the church of the forest and the river, and so we really business community and yeah. So you've got to define what that success looks like for you in those aspects. Family, I guess, was the third one. And you may find leadership in in other areas, like maybe it is your church, maybe it is your community in some way, shape, or form. There's just so many ways to serve and to and women's voices are so dramatically needed. Like I just go to different things and yeah, there are still a lot of suits, and we are way, way, way underrepresented. And I think we've got to, I know that women don't want to be perceived as whiny, or that things are going to be, level set against a measure that, we're somehow not at equal value as a man stepping into the role. I actually had that said to me by several people when we started Women for 50%, which shocked me to my core. It shocked me to my core. And it wasn't just men, it was women.
And what did
it was,
what was it that they were saying to you?
Well, they were articulating that, we were actually underserving women by creating this goal of having 50% of women represented in the legislature, because somehow we weren't equal to the task.
Ooh.
And I said, have you talked to the people in the legislature? Are you kidding me? We have, we only have, we can only go up. But it was, it was this whole idea that if you put a goal for, having women either running in campaigns or sitting in the legislature, that you were somehow pushing an agenda that was going to create less value in that seat. And so, I think one of the things that came out of that for me was we have to create more awareness of just, how many women are graduating from universities, the kinds of things that women are doing, and that is, again, going back to one of the reasons why I let my name stand for some of these awards, because women just have to be stepping forward. I don't agree with everything in the Lean In book, but I do agree that you've got to take a risk sometimes and push yourself out there. So, that's a really important aspect. It's listening to those voices that say, and I'm an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. I'm driven, but I am an introvert. So, going into some of these situations is not totally comfortable for me. But you build your capability by taking steps through different things. So, you know, if you really want leadership and you think I'm not ready for that, take a step into the board that you're interested in, or the organization that you're interested in. So where I was going to segue was when, and this is going back to understanding what you want and what you're willing to do for it. And then, you know, who can help you. So Dave Grabentz and I own Innovatia 50-50. So we're co-owners and co-CEOs, but I guess we're co-presidents now. But we, you know, when we were contemplating buying the business, you know, we purchased it, but from Bell Alliant, but we had to get a bank to back us for working capital. And we actually went to 6 banks, and we finally did, you know, and thank God we got the Bank of Nova Scotia on side. And you know, but every time somebody said no, we learned from that and said, why, you know, what is it that we're not displaying to you? And we learned from that. We did a ton of preparation for each one of those meetings. We did a incredible amount of planning and replanning and repositioning ourselves as we were going through that. So just because somebody says no once to something doesn't mean that, you know, you should just walk away and, you know, tuck your tail between your legs. You need to learn from that. And that goes back to what are you willing to do? What are you willing to accept? And the other, you know, as we got into running the business a little bit, I said, you know, there's a ton of people out there that know how to have been successful at running businesses. This was we were new at entrepreneurship. So we chose 6 people that we, you know, admired and respected, and some that we knew very, very well, and some we didn't know very well at all. And we know, and again, everybody said yes. There was always a yes. And they met with us and we laid out our business plan. And every time we had a conversation, we learned something. And we took that back and we integrated that into our plan to move forward. You know, when we were looking at buying the business, we also, because we were buying it from Bell, and our major client was Nortel that was going bankrupt, but they had good products that they were selling their, you know, their products to. So, you know, their big, you know, systems that they were selling to, like a Cisco or an Avaya. And they had something called a stalking horse. So for every product, they had 3 stalking horses. And we had to go to each one of those companies with our business plan and say, would you transition that service to us? Because we were servicing that product in some way or another. And again, 90% of them said yes. In fact, after that, you know, stalking horse process was over, I think there was only 1 company that declined and took it in-house. So the point there is that, you know, we learned every step of the way, and we inculcated whatever it was that we learned into the next step of talking to a client to take that on. So, you know, there's a lot of planning in buying your own business, and ensuring that you've got the capacity to, you know, to hold safe for the employees that you've got in your responsibility. So when we started, when we bought, we had about 213 employees, and we grew the business to just over 700. In the spring, we did sell a piece of our business, one of our software products, And so we're down between 550 and 600 people, and we still have Bangalore, Calgary, and St. John, as offices. But as you know, and this is being flexible in terms of, where the environment's going. So much is virtual. And I'm here in my working from technologies. One can be a wonderful thing, working from, a river house, but 95% of our employees now work from home. So we had to be very flexible in terms of how we moved into that virtual world and ensuring that our clients were happy and that our employees were happy and that, they were safe where they were and they had good technology capacity. So, there is another component to this, which is really being inquisitive, like understanding what's going on in an area that you want to be involved in. So it's, same as when we started up with Women for 50%, we had to do a lot of investigation. Why weren't more women jumping on board and putting their names forward in the campaigns? What would it take to enable them to, to run? How could we support them? What kind of education did they need? What kind of awareness could we create within the parties themselves? And, not to create any shame, but we held the parties accountable. So we had a thermometer that said, here's how many women are running in your party. And here's how many women are running in your party. And here's how many women are running in your party. And we had that on our website at the time. It'd be Facebook now, but we held the parties accountable. We didn't just go and talk to them and then, politely step back. And I think, women are so afraid of, that B word and being, labeled as aggressive or labeled as, uncooperative or labeled as whatever. If you are pushing forward and, as recently as yesterday, I was in a meeting and I was labeled as being aggressive. And in a nice, but a little bit patronizing, well, she's aggressive. Yeah. And I said, well, I don't understand. And here's another thing that, whether it's a passive comment or it's something that's maybe intuited in the conversation, it's bringing that out and saying, could I understand that a little bit better? Like, why would you say that was aggressive? Could we just stop there for a minute? Because, I wouldn't want to offend anyone, but I want to make sure that we're getting the right things on the table and talking about the right things. Everything was great. And, I stepped when we left the meeting, I said to the person that made the comment, I'm sure you didn't mean anything by it, but I just wanted to make sure that we got that cleared up. And, that takes practice. The first time you do it, you feel like, an idiot, but, you're not the one in the wrong. And so don't take that, don't own that, don't inculcate that to yourself. You're the one putting something forward that's important to you. Let your voice be heard, lean into that. I think that's really important.
It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, I have so many notes. I should see like I've got like a page of notes and all kinds of questions. So you let me know when you're ready.
Sure. And I don't know how much more time we have. I'm kind of cognizant of that. So I just wanted to pause and see if there was anything that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, well, I have a couple.
And I guess the other, just, another thing that I did venture into our business, which is changing and shifting all the time. And it's changing and shifting because the market is changing and shifting. And then, the environment's changing and shifting. And we could just say, wow, we've had lots of success and now we'll just put the top on the box and say, thanks. But, you know, where you see change and, you know, disruption, you see opportunity as well. So it's really understanding what that opportunity is, do your homework, and then, you know, move into it. Because I think that, you know, a lot of times because of where we are, and I really think this is legitimate, you know, there are so many negative things that we don't see the possibility and the light. And then, you know, it maybe feels like we're being not respectful of those challenges that are out there if we're pushing our agenda. So I just want to, that's really important. I think you know, we can't let progress stall again because there are other things. In fact, it's much more important right now. These issues that I laid out at the beginning, you know, whether it's environment, LGBTQ, women's rights, anti-Semitism, all women's voices need to be in leadership positions to change the conversation, to change that momentum, to stop that that growth that's going on out there. We need more women, and we need more leaders that are, you know, not the same, the suits. And look at, I have I have two sons and 4 grandsons, so I love them all, and I want them to succeed and be part of the conversation as well. But women, you know, and I guess when you look at social media today and you look at advertising today, it is shocking to me that it feels like we're taking a step back in terms of what's important. And we just need to be very cognizant of that and not be undone by what's going on in the world. We need to step forward even more because of what's going on in the world. And just to that, you know, I talked about gender equality in politics and in leadership roles in boards and commissions and so on. But that takes place also in organizations like our education system. You know, look around and ask yourself, how many deputy ministers are female? Think about that. Every one of you out there, think about that. How many deputy ministers, and this is talking about bureaucracy, are female deputy ministers in education, health, social development? Where are our female leaders? And if there are not equality and you know, diversity in our leadership, why is that? And what are we doing to change that in terms of going forward to our MLAs and our different groups that we're a part of, and making sure that we're advocating for that. So there's an advocacy that we need to be responsible for as women. And so I just, I wanted to make that comment, and that is something that has been brewing in me for a while as I think about, you leave the pandemic and some of the, the latency that there is in that. And I look around at the organizations that I'm involved in, and sometimes it's a little discouraging, but you have to put yourself out there and include other women in bringing forward those ideas. Yeah.
I mean, a couple questions that I'm walking away from this conversation with thinking about, and will share for any of the women who are listening, is this piece around being called to serve. And I think that we lead at multiple levels as women, and you can, leadership can be defined however you want to define it. But I really think we need to be asking ourselves the question, what do we want our life or our career to be about? And I agree with you that there is definitely a trend that I'm noticing, well, we could, statistically, we could look at all the facts and figures and be able to draw a line to this is truth, this is not a story, or that we're making up, that, you know, women's role in leadership is either maintaining or declining. Most data is saying that it's declining from leadership all the way through multiple levels, right? But what I'm hearing you say is be curious. So if you want to be part of this, you know, part of the solution, then go out there and look for these things. Go out there and get on Google and look at, you know, how many MLAs do we have in our province that are female? All of this information is easy and accessible online, because we need to disrupt the denial. We need to be aware of what's going on. We can't change what we don't acknowledge. And I think that it's easy for us to turn a blind eye and think that, well, there's women in leadership positions in my office. I see women around. So clearly this is a non-issue, you know, when you start looking at the data and you get really curious about it, you begin to realize that that is actually not true. I don't know if you saw the image that's been circulating on the internet last week about, it was a photo of the leaders at COP27, the climate change conference in Egypt. A group photo was taken.
Yeah.
It was all men.
Yep.
And I said, like, does now nobody look at this and think, I mean, we just make up more than half of the planet. Why would women want to have a voice about what happens to the planet? You know, like, what would we know about Mother Nature? I mean, it's just like, well, what? Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to say is I think that it's important for all the women to recognize that you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And so if you're continuously sitting back and kind of ducking out and not at least using your voice, either by looking for a mentor or a role model, or asking for feedback, or saying, I don't agree with this, or there's something wrong with the picture here, then in truth, we kind of get what we're tolerating. We're kind of maintaining status quo. And I really think that that's important. I wanted to share one thing with you that surprised me this week. I was having a conversation with a very nice gentleman. We were talking about work, what's changed since the pandemic. And he has a lot of data. And he said, we didn't experience any great resignation in Canada. In fact, we're coining it as the great upgrade. And I just reflect on that. It burned I got reactive straight out the gate, because I thought, I don't think that that's the experience for women. I don't think women experienced a great upgrade statistically. And I'm not sure that that's really, you know, true, but they hadn't really looked into the gender component, right? They just looking at it overall from a statistical standpoint. So I think it's important that we really do look at lots of layers to things, like question everything. Like your husband sounds like he questions a lot of things, and so do you. Don't accept things just because they're packaged and sent to you in a neat little bow. Like, do some further digging, be curious.
Yes. And you know, how do you define success? You know, those three questions, they take time. So give yourself time to think about that. And what are you willing to do for it? And that goes back to the curiosity and understanding, really identifying what it is and how you're going to get it, and what's the plan. Because, you know, if you want a certain thing and you need to step up academically, or, you know, in the community or whatever, and you know, and there are so many people who want to help. There are many, many people that want to help. You know, the people that will be on, you know, your mailing list, Henriette, and reach out to them. I'm going to give you an example. In the another one, in the ceremony that took place just weeks ago, really, for the Order of Canada, I was just so struck by the wonderful things that are being done by people, the positive, wonderful things that are being done by people that don't get any air time. And our young people do not get that, in terms of, you know, what they did and the resilience that it took to do that. And I met a lady, Rose Lipsky, who is 93, and she is a survivor of the Holocaust, of a camp. And so I asked her if she would come and speak to a group of people, a young group. And so I went to a middle school and a high school here locally, and she's going to be doing a Zoom call, and we're going to create a podcast. So again, you know,
Can't wait.
when we were sitting at lunch, I said, I'm going to go ask if she'll, and Mike said, oh, Mom, like she's 93. And I said, oh, yeah, well, so what? And
never
so
really ask.
it's really about that. And I want people to understand too, if you look at me or look at Henriette and you go, oh yeah, that's them.
Mhm.
Well, I grew up in the slums of St. John. And if you want to know what that looks like, it ain't pretty. It wasn't, the wharf rats were bigger than the babies. But it's what you do every day, those decisions that you make to grow your capability, to figure out what are your next steps, to build your network. And I have a great friend, Eldia Landry, and the friendships that you make as you're building your network too are just incredible. But she would say that your net worth is your network, or your network is your net worth. And but that's one step at a time. That is one relationship at a time. That's one conversation at a time. And it doesn't mean that you got to throw yourself into this like 10 hours a day. But like I said, think about in the next week, who are you going to make a call to?
Yeah.
And maybe that call will lead you to another call, lead you to another call. And in 3 months, what does that add up to? So I would just encourage people to, to expand, ask people. It may not be people that maybe it is someone and let's, for the sake of argument, say that Harriet and I, and ask us.
Yeah.
Just ask.
Anytime. I always say it, send me a message at any time. If you have a question and you're looking, if I don't have a resource, I might know somebody who does, and I can connect you. So many connections, and that reciprocity that you're talking about, people actually like to help. It feels good to help, people who are called to serve will want to, but it requires you to take the first step and to believe that you're worthy of help.
Right.
And to ask, and that your idea is important, and people will fuel you once you start asking for it.
Right.
My business completely built on relationships, networks, people who have helped me, who have introduced me to people, who have referred me to people, and hard work. But it wasn't luck. It was definitely not, so.
Yeah.
And you learn that. Oh, and over time, as you said, that confidence comes from practice. The more that I remember the very first time I started my business, I was so afraid to even charge money. I was like guilty for asking to get paid for what I do, so over time that changes, but it does come with putting yourself out there. And
it does. And it's the first step. It's terra incognita. You're stepping out into it's courage. Take that first step, and it doesn't have to be a big one. That first step does not have to be big. So ask yourself what success looks like for you. What are you willing to do for it? What do you need to do for it? And who can help you with that? Like, that is really important. And, the context of today is, yes, we're weighted down by a lot of things, but it's almost more imperative for women to step up.
Yep.
And for women in leadership roles to step forward and help others move along. So that's our responsibility too. Those of us that are, in positions where we can encourage and, support women to, get into those opportunities for leadership.
Well, in the spirit of that, in the spirit of celebrating, in the spirit of gratitude, in the spirit of sending the elevator down and bringing it back up, I want to thank you for being here with us today and just being an incredible role model and sharing your experience and your advice. And it was very inspiring to be here with you. So I will be sharing information. So I'm sure hopefully some women are going to reach out to you and say, I'm thinking about getting into a leadership position or thinking of getting into politics. What do? How do I figure this out? So thank you for offering that support and resources.
I just have one thing before I go, and this is something that my daughter sent me last night. And where is it?
course, because you're looking for it now, you won't be able to find it.
It is. Here it is. It's Brandy Carlisle, and the YouTube video is The Joke,
Mhm.
and just listen to that.
Thank you for leaving us with that.
Okay.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much for your time, Roxanne.
Peace.
Pleasure.
Peace out.
Yeah, you
Good
too.
luck.
Peace. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.